Alright, this is section 1-3 called Variables and Expressions. So I'm going to go ahead into some vocabulary first. And so the first vocabulary term is called algebra, and in the book it says it's a branch of mathematics dealing with symbols. Another way to say that is we're just using numbers, letters, and or symbols or operations. So algebra just has variables in it, numbers and letters that you put together. We'll learn that a little bit more throughout the year. And the next term is called variables or variable, and that is where a letter is used to represent a number. I'm sure we've seen this throughout the last couple years. And the next vocabulary term is called an algebraic expression. So we've talked a little bit about this in the last section. We talked about a numeric expression, which had all numbers. An algebraic expression has numbers, letters, operations, so it has a little bit of everything. A couple examples is x plus 2. That's an algebraic expression. There's no equal sign. And then another one is 15t minus 10. Again, that's algebra, so it's an algebraic expression. And we call it an expression because it doesn't have an equal sign. If we were to include an equal sign, that would be called an equation. So if I made this, say x plus 2 equals 7, now that's an equation, an algebraic equation. No longer is it called an expression. Although one side is an expression and the other side is an expression also. Same thing with 15t minus 10. If I set it equal to, let's say, 23, now I have an expression on this side, an expression on that side. When you set them equal to each other, you call that an equation. So important stuff to know. Moving on. Alright, so example number 1 says evaluate x plus y minus 9. And we see that x is 15 and y is 26. So what we're going to do is called what we call a substitution. So we're going to substitute instead of x. I'm going to write 15. I still bring down my plus sign, and then y is now 26, and then still minus 9. So I'm going to evaluate this expression, which means to find the value. So I'm going to go ahead and do PEMDAS. There are no parentheses, there are no exponents, there is no multiply or divide for step 3. So I go on to addition and subtraction, and I do whatever comes first. 15 plus 26 is 41. I'm still going to drop down my minus 9. And then again, that's the only step that's left, so subtract those and I get 32. That's example number 1. Alright, moving on to example 2. It says to evaluate each expression if k equals 2, m equals 7, and n equals 4. So again, we're finding the value of each of these expressions. So we substitute. Alright, so part A here, I'm going to take 6. Anytime a number and a letter are written right beside each other, that means multiply. So we have 6 times m is 7, minus 3 times k, and k is 2. Following order of operations, there are no parentheses or exponents, so step 3 is multiply or divide. 6 times 7 is 42, and then we also have 3 times 2, which is 6, and 42 minus 6 is 36. Alright, that's A. Part B, substitute m times n. So m is 7 times n, which is 4, and it's still dividing by 2. 7 times 4 is 28. And we're still dividing by 2, which gives us 28 divided by 2 is 14. Last one, part C, let's substitute n as 4 plus parentheses k, which is 2, plus sign 5 times m, and m is 7. So on this one, we've got PEMDAS again. So we go to the parentheses. In the parentheses, we've got 2 plus 5 times 7. Inside parentheses, you must always follow PEMDAS. So I don't add first. I've got to do parentheses in there. There are none. There are no exponents, but there is multiply or divide. So I end up with 5 times 7, which is 35, and that is in parentheses, and it's still adding 4 up front. Now, next step, since I've multiplied, I'm still in the parentheses, so I've got 4 plus, and now I've got the parentheses being added, that is 37. Now, you don't have to leave it in the parentheses since you've already simplified it down. So you have 4 plus 37, which is 41. That becomes the last step on addition and subtraction. Moving on to example 3. Alright, and then we've got example 3, wants you to translate each phrase into an algebraic expression. So again, there's no equation here, but there's also a vocabulary term right above this that's called defining a variable, or the variable. In this case, what it means is to give a definition of the variable that you're using. So I'll use it here in this example. Part A says 12 points more than the Falcons scored. Well, for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say F plus 12. And I'm saying F, and the F is representing, I'm going to call this what I'm defining it. So F is representing the Falcons. Pen's giving me some trouble here. Falcons. Points. Alright, so I say F plus 12 because I'm saying it's 12 more than the Falcons scored, and I define the variable by saying F represents the Falcons' points. Part B says 4 times a number decreased by 6. So 4 times a number, and then you're subtracting 6 since it's decreasing by 6, and then I'm going to define the variable. So I'm going to say that N represents a number. Doesn't really say too much more, so they call it a number, so that's what I'm calling N. So I define the variable as representing a number. Alright, example 4. Alright, so this one, example 4, says the Johnstown Soccer League ranks each team in its league using points. A team gets 3 points for a win and 1 point for a tie. Part A wants you to write an expression that can be used to find the total number of points a team receives. Well, if you get 3 points for wins, then take 3 times the number of wins, and then add 1 point times the number of ties. And I use a cursive T there for ties because if I use a regular T, it would look like this plus sign, so we don't want to get that confused. But then I also have to define the variable. I know that W is representing wins, and T represents ties. Alright, so that's part A. Now part B says, suppose in one season the North Rockets had 17 wins and 4 ties. How many points did they receive? All I'm going to do is plug in this information into what I just created in part A. So 3 times W, or 3 times 17 for the wins, plus 1 times T, the number of ties, which was 4. Now I take it and find the value. 3 times 17, I'm using PEMDAS once again, plus, underlining 1 times 4, and then my last step is to add those together. So the North Rockets would have 55 points. Alright, and that is it. Good luck.